Life over 50 has never had so much to offer. Thousands of elderly people flock to the Seniors Expo, the first in Newcastle. Boasting 69 stalls, the expo offers senior citizens a pool of information on services and products tailored to their needs.
But by putting everything together, holidays, retirement options, financial options, health options, it just lets everybody look at it and access it much more easily altogether.
Financial options, healthcare, holiday packages and funeral services were just some of the many stalls featured.
It gets us together, it informs us of what services are available to people.
New technologies were among the most popular, with many senior cits keen to explore the internet.
To holidays, to hearing aids, to cyberspace, whatever that is, I don't know, but we'll learn later on today.
Touted as a huge success, the Expo will become an annual event which will have even more on offer next year. Simone Cobb, NBN News.
The pathway to waste reduction will start here. The Redhead Recycling Centre will process about 1,000 tonnes of rubbish a week when it's finished in a fortnight. But the Hunter Resource Recovery and Solo Waste couldn't wait that long, launching the service today at Pecolbin in the Hunter Valley.
Well, we're using a unique split bin system, a 240 litre bin, which has been delivered to every house, and it has provisions to take cardboard and paper in the front section and all the other recyclables in the rear of that.
The fortnightly collection service will operate in Cessnock, Maitland and Lake Macquarie council areas. Newcastle and Port Stephens rejected the scheme. The three councils involved see the collective as one way to meet new state government guidelines to reduce landfill waste by 60% by the year 2000.
We believe it's a very important part, and it will take approximately 15% of the domestic waste out of the waste stream going to garbage.
If the overall target is to be reached, people will also have to change their attitudes to waste.
The consumer needs to look at the way in which they purchase their products and place greater demand on industry to look at the way in which they package goods. We have become a disposable society.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Night Pistol is coming to Newcastle after outstanding runs in its last two starts at Globe Derby and Adelaide. The Victorian horse is making tracks for New South Wales.
He means business too. He's going to try and break the Australian and Australasian record because he's heading off overseas to Sweden then, and I think he's competing in 3 series of races over there worth something like $300,000 each, and looking at if they win the 3, he picks up something like a $500,000 bonus.
It's a big ask, but Night Pistol's followers have no doubt the champion is up to the task.
It's just terrific to have a horse of that calibre come up here. I mean, he's a world-class trotter, based in Victoria, been racing in South Australia.
And racing brilliantly as well. The 9-year-old gelding has been giving rivals big starts recently, and while 40 metres was just too much last week, it won from the back the week before. Starting from the front line on Saturday, the mile records are certainly in reach. The Australian mark stands at 1 minute 59 by the legendary Scotch Notch in 1984, while the Australasian mark of 158.3 was set by Kiwi flyer Pride of Petite 10 years later. Jonathan Upton, NBN News. Hunter's form at home has been sound in recent appearances, but the Brisbane clash is by far its hardest. The Broncos drew with North Queensland on the weekend after hefty commitments in Super League's Tri-Series.
Yeah, they're probably a bit tired at the moment. You know, the long, bit of an arduous series. Extra minutes on the other day didn't help them.
The Mariners are perhaps catching the competition favourites at the best possible time. They've had a week off after that victory over Penrith. It's helped players get over their niggling injuries. In the only significant team change, Keith Beecham moves onto the wing with Gavin Thompson relegated to the bench. Coach Graham Murray sticking with Tri-Series hero Noel Goldthorpe at the expense of Brett Camorley, who impressed in the top grade a fortnight ago.
Yeah, it was a tough decision there, and you'll never know whether it was the right one either there, because Brett played pretty well, but I've got stuck with Noel there.
It's the last game before the start of the World Club Challenge. Murray says motivation shouldn't be a problem.
I must have warned them, if they go easy, they won't be going. No, not really. I just think they'll be in the right frame of mind.
Work began on the multi-million-dollar complex last August. Since then it's been full steam ahead, with good weather bringing the opening date forward. The centrepiece is the Hunter Valley's first indoor 50-metre pool. Workmen have nearly completed a massive task, laying no fewer than 20,000 tiles over the past month on the pool's floor. Even before the pool is filled, its reputation has travelled far and wide, with interest in using the facility as a pre-Olympic venue.
Australian Swim, who are the people who look after the Australian swimming teams, they have been and looked at the pool. They think it's of the quality of an elite training facility, and if they think so, I'm certain that other overseas people will think that way as well.
Once cleared, this area will become one of 2 fully sprung basketball courts. And for that ever-increasing number of wall climbers, there's a 16-metre vertical challenge and a 3-room weight and circuit training area. The good news is it won't be exclusively for students.
The size of the university, which is about 20,000 persons altogether, is not large enough to support a sports facility of this size, so there will be a large amount of community involvement.
The first patrons are expected to start using the facility in December. Blake Doyle, NBN News.
The Pathways to Sustainability Conference is a direct follow-on from the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. From that gathering came Local Agenda 21, an action plan for local governments and communities to improve and promote the environment.
Well, local governments are, if you like, the tier of government closest to the community.
However, in the 5 years since Rio, progress on implementing Agenda 21 has been slow. The Pathways Conference aims to put the action plan back at the forefront of global environmental thinking. Organisers have drafted a communique called the Newcastle Declaration, which, if agreed to, will go before the United Nations General Assembly next month.
The declaration basically says, here's what local governments are doing, and we want to continue work in this area, but we need both international and national government support.
The Pathways Conference has attracted more than 800 delegates from 43 countries. It will put the focus on Newcastle, not as a model for the rest of the world, but as an example of the problems and what can be achieved on a local level.
I think that's the fascination about Newcastle, that there's the good and the bad.
The Pathways to Sustainability Conference opens on Sunday. Phil Hind, NBN News.
About 100 concerned residents packed the West Wallsend Community Centre last night at a public meeting to oppose the draft heritage plan. They claimed that even though the plan is only a draft, Lake Macquarie Council has already been insisting that people paint their houses a certain colour or use wood rather than aluminium windows. The residents said they don't want their town to become another historic Morpeth. No council staff were at the meeting, but the Mayor, John Kilpatrick, and several other councillors attended. They are hoping to call a council meeting to discuss the matter further. Emma Ossian, NBN News.
It wasn't the start Newcastle was hoping for. A series of errors in the opening stages handed Adelaide possession and an early lead before the locals found their mark through Ben Melmoth, and Scott McGregor landed 3 to bring the Falcons back to level terms. But trying to maintain a 4-match winning streak, the 36ers edged ahead again. Much to the dismay of Sean Dennis, the locals down by 2 at quarter time, although a Butch Hayes pot shot on the siren nearly hit the jackpot. 23-21, Tony Jensen started to shine with points of his own, as well as the occasional assist to keep the scoreboard ticking. But the visitors stole the same idea, racing away with the basketball and a 2-point half-time lead, courtesy of Brett Maher. Plenty of talking in the Adelaide camp, but nothing could prepare them for the Tony Jensen show in the third term. Fresh from duties with the Boomers, the Australian guard sung 20 in the quarter and a lot of the visitors' hopes as well. Up 11, Newcastle looked home and hosed until the 36ers gave some hint at a comeback. But it was only short-lived as Jensen climbed to a game-high 42 and Newcastle landed back in the winner's circle with an 8-point victory.
Unemployed security guard Stan Kopeka has volunteered to patrol the railway station where the price of a fare is fear. He'll continue his one-man campaign until the violence and vandalism cease to be as regular as the peak hour trains. But it could be a long and lonely vigil. Just hours ago, a carriage was attacked by a group of young boys hurling rocks at its windows.
I was just caught the train back from work, and where I was sitting, a rock just landed. He hit the window right next to me.
The latest incident falls on the eve of the funeral for tax office worker Philip White, who was fatally bashed after catching a train home from work. The 15-year-old boy charged with the murder will face Maitland Court on Wednesday. The residents of Metford will meet with police and politicians that night to discuss ways to beat the youth gang terrorising their neighbourhood.
The Landcom will be putting lighting in along that path and in the area of the playing fields by the end of the month. There would also, I would anticipate, be a statement by City Rail regarding security at Medford Station.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Up until recently, this was the clubhouse that greeted members and visitors to the Hawks Nest Golf Club. And this is the 20-year-old facility $1.75 million later. The decision to spend the money was made as much in the interest of tourists as the club's 2,000 members.
We're a holiday destination and we're only a couple of hours from Sydney now, and so a lot of our patrons are holiday makers and visiting golfers, and they provide a lot of the impetus and the money that's allowed us to do this.
The extensions have dramatically increased the size of the club with new function and family rooms and a new pro shop. The extensions have come on top of major improvements to the 18-hole sandbelt layout. The club believes it's now in a position to take on the growing number of resort courses in the Hunter, vying for a share of the tourist dollar.
We think we've targeted the right market, and we're taking on the big boys like the Horizons, and we think we can do it just as well as them.
The club stresses that while it's keen to attract more visitors such as social hacker and Prime Minister John Howard, it remains now and forever a members club. The extensions will be officially opened on Saturday night. Phil Hind, NBN News. Warren Mundine was elected to the Dubbo Council in 1995. Today he chaired the Aboriginal Network Conference aimed at improving relations between Aboriginal communities and local councils. As the debate rages over a Prime Ministerial apology to the stolen generation, Mr Mundine believes local councils also have a responsibility.
I think leadership does need to come from the federal and state areas, but I think at the end of the day, if we're going to have a reconciliation process. It really, if it's going to be successful, it really has to be at the local level.
The head of the New South Wales Local Government Department agrees that councils are best placed to drive genuine reconciliation.
There is a great willingness on the part of local councils to work with local communities, including Aboriginal communities, to resolve problems and to grow an area. And I think it's very positive.
It can be a difficult process at times. A plan by the Warramai Land Council to train young Aboriginal offenders on its farm at Tanilba looks like being quashed after a public outcry.
I think it's sad that, as I said, the only ones it's going to lose out of the kids. And it will be disappointing.
The conference continues tomorrow. Phil Hind, NBN News.
I really felt like one of them cheeseburgers.
Cheers, everybody.
The Raymond Terrace company CSR Timber Products has become a trailblazer in forging pathways to sustainability. CSR is one of 10 businesses congratulated by the federal government today for cleaning up their act. Proving good environmental practice makes good economic sense.
I think the big lesson out of this is that it's not a capital spending issue, it's a way of looking at doing business that is better for the environment and better for the business at large.
The firms had taken part in the Cleaner Production Demonstration Project, a scheme which provided the businesses with environmental consultants for 2 years. One of the most impressive achievements was that of CSR, which reduced its energy consumption by 200,000 kilowatts a year, cut back on greenhouse emissions by 194 tonnes and saved more than $750,000.
Number one, concentrating on the waste we produce, eliminating it or turning it into environmentally neutral waste, and secondly, doing things better.
The successful results will be used as case studies to encourage more Australian businesses to follow suit. Simone Cobb, NBN News.
The 4 adults and a juvenile cruised a couple of kilometres off the coast of Newcastle, making the slow journey to warmer waters to mate or calve. Until a few years ago, the southern rights were almost extinct, and while their numbers are increasing, capturing a glimpse of the mammals in motion is always a breathtaking sight. Meanwhile, in Sydney, off Bondi and Botany Bay, 10 humpbacks were spotted heading north. Although they'll never know it, what better way to celebrate World Environment Day? National parks are reminding boat owners not to come closer than 100 metres, or in the case of mothers with young calves, to stay at least 300 metres away. A simple rule to keep such beautiful creatures from becoming distressed. Sarah Griffiths, NBN News.
World Environment Day opened on a sombre note in Newcastle today, a symbolic funeral march mourning the destruction of the planet. The Wilderness Society organised the rally to protest the federal government's decision to increase wood chip exports and continued support of uranium mining.
We feel that the decisions that the government have made are leading us down the pathway to unsustainability.
Federal Minister for the Environment, Senator Robert Hill, attended the final day of the Pathways to Sustainability conference. He says the real responsibility of environmental action lies with the people, not government.
And when it comes to the crunch, it's what happens at the ground that really counts, whether people turn off their lights, whether they use their cars responsibly.
He announced a grant of $215,000 to go towards the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in 30 local government areas. But many delegates to the conference have slammed the government's efforts.
Well, it's pretty token, and it's nothing compared to the massive subsidies still given to fossil fuel industries, building freeways and charging down the unsustainable road.
The conference culminated with the signing of the Newcastle Declaration, which commits local authorities around the world to implementing sustainable development. The document will be presented to the United Nations in New York later this month. As the conference winds up, there is an overwhelming feeling of optimism that change has already begun. Delegates say the conference here will become a greater turning point in environmental action than the Rio Earth Summit 5 years ago, because the future of the planet has been placed in the hands of local, not federal governments.
You've got a lot of local governments here who are going to go back and put a lot into action.
The James Fletcher Group of Mental Health Services in Newcastle was today honoured with an accreditation from the Council of Healthcare Standards. The award comes as mental health services in the Hunter embark on a major restructuring. Helping guide the shake-up is Vaughan Carr, Professor of Psychiatry at Newcastle University.
Mental health has always been seen somewhat separate from the mainstream of medical care, and there's an increased emphasis these days on the need to bring it closer to general medicine.
A review last year recommended mental health services be made more user-friendly by shifting the emphasis from where a patient lives to what a patient needs.
I think it'll be hard, but I don't think it's impossible. I think that staff are keen for some changes. They're, I think, very interested in having a really strong clinical focus on service delivery.
In another change, supervision of mental health services in the Hunter will now be overseen by a new board made up of doctors, staff and the general public.
We need to have people having a say in mental health services coming from a variety of backgrounds.
The restructuring of mental health services in the Hunter is expected to take a year. Phil Hind, NBN News. The two men had been abseiling from the popular Monkey's Face lookout in the Wattigan Ranges. At this stage, it's unclear how the accident happened, but it took rescue crews some time to locate the pair at the base of the 50-metre rock wall. One of the injured men was wrapped in a thermal blanket, awaiting the arrival of the Westpac rescue helicopter. A paramedic was winched down through the thick forest canopy to stabilise the man, all the time aware that a severe storm cell was approaching from the south. The decision was made that the man couldn't be carried out and a stretcher was sent in to winch him out. His companion suffered a broken arm and was able to walk from the bush with ambulance officers. Both men were taken to the John Hunter Hospital. Phil Hind, NBN News.
The Bart Cummings train Dane Ripper was ridden by Chris Muntz and paid $31.60 and $8.60, $9.70 and $8.80 for the places. It helped boost the trifecta to more than $26,000. The 2,400 metre Queensland Derby was billed as a two-horse race between exciting 3-year-old Yippee-Yi-Yo and Marble Halls, and the two champions delivered the perfect finish. Not as generous return for the Jack Denham trained Yippee-Yi-Yo, $2.40 and $1.30. Marble Halls, $1.30 and Summer Bow, $2.20. The Quinella, $2.40 and the trifecta, $21.30.
After 55 years of peace, the smell of burnt gunpowder tinged the air at Fort Scratchley as the big guns fired in defence once more. Their target was a Japanese submarine lurking off the coast at Newcastle, but the act of aggression was nothing more than a mock skirmish to commemorate a city under fire in 1942. Up to 3,000 people flocked to the historic headland, keen to experience a part of Newcastle's heritage.
It's not every day people can see history reenacted, particularly the way it was today with the Onslow participating. We've tried several times to get the Navy to participate before, but today we were very fortunate.
Fort Scratchley is the only land-based unit in Australia to have fired upon a major enemy vessel. The city was targeted by the Japanese because of its steelworks. No one was closer to the front line than 75-year-old Vivian Rowe, who manned the #1 gun on that day 55 years ago. He says the only thing that saved the Japanese sub was an order not to fire the crucial shot.
I knew that we should be firing it, and if we had fired sooner, would have got him.
Simone Cobb, NBN News.
Sydney had a point to prove to Illawarra this afternoon at the Newcastle International Hockey Centre. Beaten by the Red and Whites in the semis last year, Sydney cried out for revenge. Boasting state and former Olympic stars, the competition favourites had no troubles in stamping their authority, Stephen Kane smashing home a 3-0 half-time lead. From a short corner early in the second term, the Blue and Golds looked set to increase their lead, but the umpire had different ideas. So to Illawarra's scrambling defence, the Reds did their best to frustrate the Sydney Siders, at the same time lifting the spirits of their forward line. A series of near misses gave some faint hope of a comeback, before Sydney steamrolled its way towards the state title with a match-winning goal. In other grades, Manning Valley beat Lithgow in the Division 2 final, while Tamworth won Division 3 on points. Netball and Sutherland has gone through the state championships undefeated for one of the most convincing title victories in history. They finished clear of Charlestown, who beat Newcastle in the final match of the tournament. A much closer affair in the junior divisions, with several teams in with a chance of state honours. That was until Manly edged ahead of the pack late in the day in both the under-19s and 17s to steal the championship spoils. Mixed results for country teams in the lower grades. Tamworth and Maitland finished joint runners-up in the 19 years minor, while Maitland and Hastings Valley finished trumps in the minor 17s. Jonathan Upton, NBN News.
Despite predictions of rain at Byron Bay, conditions were ideal for the #1 state pennant final. It was a city versus country affair after Cabramatta had a semi-final win over defending pennant holders St John's Park. The Sydney Siders were too strong for Lennox Head, 58-49. In Grade 2 at Maitland, Charlestown led all the way against Warilla from the south coast. A pennant to Charlestown, 61-49. At Charlestown itself, a nearby club, Burwood Colliery, played the entrants from the Central Coast in 3rd grade. In a close match where the final score did not reflect the keenness of play, the entrants' eventual winners, 75-49. More success for the Central Coast at Wollongong, Munmora beating Grafton City 63-43. And a close call for Lambton-New Lambton in Grade 6 at Batemans Bay. The Newcastle side holding off a spirited fight back by the home team, eventually defeating the South Coast team 57-54.
Central North hasn't been in a Cordwell Cup final for 4 years. However, the Red and White's defensive effort in the first half proved they were going to be no easy beats. North scrambled to meet almost every challenge, but with a weight of possession late in the opening term, Central West finally crossed. A missed conversion kept it a 5-point ball game before Central North narrowed the deficit with a kick of their own. It started a comeback that continued into the second term, North's defensive effort the backbone of an upset 3-point victory. The earlier final of the Richardson Shield was also a battle of the boot between Newcastle and Riverina. A penalty goal apiece started the encounter, and while the locals were given a headache soon after, it hurt even more when the Novocastrians landed their second. 6-3. Points for Newcastle then came in the form of a try. And while Riverina crossed late in the match, it wasn't enough, Newcastle winning 11-8. Jonathan Upton, NBN News.
The 5 leading tour operators have just spent the last 3 days on a whirlwind tour of the Hunter region. They've taken in Colban's world-famous vineyards, Port Stephens and Barrington Tops. The Hunter Valley is being sold to over 10 million Brits in an intensive media campaign to raise the area's profile.
It's fairly limited. It obviously has some profile because of the wine, essentially. That's, you think of Australian wines and Hunter does come to mind, in the UK too. But beyond that, not too much.
Impressed with what the area has to offer the tourist, the UK contingent says more must be done to promote the Hunter.
I think the tourists now are a lot more educated. They're looking for a lot more new product and new areas. I think they want to get away from the city centres.
A groundswell of tourists is a near certainty for Sydney during the 2000 Olympics. The challenge now is to include the Hunter on their itinerary.
Obviously there are some areas that have better opportunities than others, and we certainly would consider the Hunter to be one of those.
Blake Doyle, NBN News.